The mysterious stranger, uncovering the secrets of a wandering man. It was a bright, sunny day in Mikuru, and the villagers were busy with the harvest. The air was filled with the scent of ripe crops and the sounds of laughter and chatter as the people worked in the fields. Suddenly, a commotion erupted at the edge of the village. A group of cattle herders spotted a stranger stumbling towards them, collapsing as he reached the outskirts of the village. Without hesitation, the young men rushed to his aid and carried him to the hut of the traditional healer. Word of the stranger's arrival quickly spread throughout the village, and soon everyone was clamoring to catch a glimpse of the mysterious figure. The unmarried women of the village were particularly eager to see him, hoping that he might be a potential husband. They gathered outside the healer's hut, whispering excitedly and giggling amongst themselves. The village chief, a tall and muscular man, with a stern expression on his face, entered the dimly lit hut. His broad shoulders nearly touched the doorway as he strode in, causing the floor to shake slightly. The hut was small and cramped, with only a few pieces of furniture scattered around the room. The walls were made of clay, with small openings for ventilation. The air inside was thick with the smell of herbs and a faint aroma of burnt wood. The healer noticed the chief's arrival and beckoned him over. In a hushed tone, he whispered to the chief, "This man has sustained many injuries, but his wounds are healing quickly. It's as if his body is rapidly regenerating." As the chief's eyes adjusted to the dim light, he saw the traditional healer hunched over the injured man. The healer was a small, wiry man, with a bald head and wrinkled skin that spoke of his age and wisdom. He was busy cleaning and dressing the man's wounds, his skilled hands moving with lightning speed. The chief looked at the injured man. He saw the man's chest rise and fall steadily. "That's impossible," the chief whispered back to the healer. "No human can heal that quickly." The healer nodded. "Yes, I've also noticed some other strange things. He growls in his sleep, almost like an animal. And his eyes, they glow in the dark." The chief's eyebrows furrowed in suspicion. "Are you saying this man is not human?" "I'm not sure," the healer replied cautiously. "But something about him is different, and it makes me uneasy." Jabali's eyes widened at this revelation, and he looked over at the stranger with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. "Keep a close eye on him, Zubri," he said sternly. "We must know who he is and where he comes from." As the sun began to set, the villagers reluctantly returned to their homes, still buzzing with excitement about the stranger's arrival. Little did they know, this was only the beginning of a strange and unsettling chapter in their village's history. As the morning sun rose over Mikuru, the villagers were startled to find a dead calf lying on the outskirts of the village. The animal had been viciously attacked, with deep claw marks and bite wounds covering its body. The villagers quickly gathered to investigate, and soon discovered the massive tracks of a creature that resembled a lion. But there were no lions in the area, and the villagers were left scratching their heads in confusion. Amidst the crowd of onlookers, was the mysterious stranger who had arrived the day before. He too was puzzled by the strange tracks, and offered to help the villagers solve the mystery. The chief's keen eyes noticed that the young man seemed to be in good health and high spirits, despite the severity of his injuries from the day before. The chief approached the young man, and remarked, "You seem to have recovered quickly. I hope you are feeling better today." The young man nodded, and replied, "Yes, thank you. Your healer is very skilled." The chief nodded in agreement before asking, "And what of your origins? Who are you, and where do you come from?" The stranger looked up, and met his gaze. "I am Paka," he said simply. "Paka," the chief repeated, his eyebrows raised in surprise. "I have not heard of that name before. Where do you come from?" Paka hesitated for a moment, as if considering his response. "I come from many places," he finally said, a cryptic smile playing at the corners of his lips. "I am a traveler. I wander where the wind takes me." The chief nodded, then paused for a moment before continuing. "I couldn't help but notice your interest in the lion tracks," he said. "Do you have any theories about where they may have come from?" Paka shrugged. "I have seen many strange things in my travels," he said. "But these tracks are unlike anything I have seen before. Perhaps it is a creature from a distant land, or a spirit that has taken the form of a lion. Who can say?" The chief was intrigued by Paka's mysterious response, but he knew better than to push further. The chief decided to keep a close eye on the stranger, hoping to uncover the truth behind his sudden arrival. As the villagers investigated the calf's death, they couldn't help but feel worried about the presence of a predator. However, their concerns were somewhat overshadowed by the excitement of the upcoming festival of first fruit. This was one of the biggest yearly celebrations of the village, where they thanked their ancestors and the gods for the successful harvest. The entire village was bustling with activity, preparing for the festivities. The women were busy cooking, the men were setting up decorations, and the children were running around, playing games. The air was filled with the delicious aroma of roasted meat, and various dishes made from the freshly harvested fruits and vegetables. As the night fell, the village came alive with music and dancing. Paka, who had quickly become the center of attention with his wild stories, was entertaining the crowds. The villagers were completely engrossed in his tales of adventure and mischief. Paka was a mysterious and enigmatic young man, with a lean, muscular build and piercing eyes that seemed to hold untold secrets. His skin was dark and taut, suggesting a life spent outdoors under the hot sun. He moved with a fluid, almost feline grace, and his footsteps were almost completely silent, suggesting a high level of skill and stealth. His hair was long and black, with a wildness that matches the untamed wilderness around him. Despite his youth, there was an air of wisdom and experience about him, as if he had lived many lives in a short span of time. His clothing was simple, yet well-worn, suggesting that he has spent much of his life on the move. Paka was a fascinating and intriguing figure, with an aura of mystery and danger that was both alluring and intimidating. Meanwhile, Jabali, the village chief, couldn't help but notice that Paka was not eating any of the food that was being offered to him. However, his wife Akina was completely taken by Paka's charm and was more interested in hearing more of his stories. As he watched, Jabali's eyes fell on his wife, Akina, who was also watching Paka with keen interest. He knew his wife had always been taken by the charms of younger men, and he couldn't help but feel a pang of jealousy. "Come with me, Akina," Jabali said, taking his wife's hand and leading her away from the crowds. "What is it, Jabali?" Akina asked, her eyes still fixed on Paka. "I see the way you look at him," Jabali said, his voice low and serious. "But be careful, my dear. There is something not right about that young man." "What do you mean?" Akina asked, her brow furrowing in confusion. "He doesn't eat or drink like the rest of us," Jabali said. "And yet, he drinks an alarming amount of palm wine. It's as if he's trying to hide something." Akina's expression softened. "Jabali, my love, you worry too much. Paka is just a young man passing through. There is no need to be suspicious of him." Jabali sighed, knowing his wife was stubborn, and would not be easily convinced. He turned to look at her, taking in her beauty. Akina was a striking woman, with high cheekbones and full lips. Her hair was braided in intricate patterns, and her colorful clothing hugged her curves in all the right places. She was the envy of many women in the village. Jabali knew he was the luckiest man of all to have her as his wife. "Perhaps you're right, my dear," Jabali said with a small smile. "But promise me you'll be careful around him. There's something about Paka that doesn't sit right with me." "I promise," Akina said, laying a hand on her husband's arm. "But for now, let us enjoy the festivities. It's a time for celebration, after all." Jabali nodded, squeezing his wife's hand before leading her back to the crowds. But even as he danced and sang with the villagers, a sense of unease lingered in his heart. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was not right about this stranger in their midst. As the villagers made their way back to their homes in the early hours of the morning, a blood-curdling scream pierced the night air. They quickly rushed towards the direction of the sound, their hearts pounding with fear. Jabali and Akina were among the first to arrive at the scene of the commotion. They found a woman wailing and rocking back and forth, her two goats lying dead at her feet. The unmistakable tracks of the lion-like creature were all around. Panic spread quickly through the village. The villagers had never seen anything like this before, and they didn't know what to do. Jabali gathered the village elders together, and they began to discuss a plan of action. "We must set traps," one elder suggested. But how do we know what we're dealing with? Another countered. We know what we saw, Jabali said, his voice steady despite the fear he felt inside. It's a lion, or something like it. And we must do whatever it takes to protect our people. The elders agreed, and the villagers set to work, setting traps and fortifying their homes. But despite their efforts, the creature continued to strike, leaving a trail of destruction and fear in its wake. Meanwhile, Jabali couldn't help but feel irritated by the growing popularity of Paka. Everywhere he went, people fawned over him and listened to his every word. Even the other hunters seemed to defer to his opinions on how to capture the beast. As the days went by, Paka's fame only grew. He was hailed as a hero for his efforts to protect the village from the mysterious predator, and even the women who had once been wary of him now fawned over him. Jabali couldn't escape the constant chatter about Paka, even in his own home. His wife, Akina, was particularly taken with Paka, and Jabali found himself feeling a mixture of envy and resentment towards the young man. The night was quiet, with only the distant sound of crickets and the occasional rustle of leaves breaking the silence. The moon was just a sliver in the sky, casting a dim light over the village. The chief, hidden in the shadows, watched with anticipation as Paka moved stealthily from one hut to another, checking each one with great care before moving on. The chief had suspected that there was something unusual about this young man, and now he was finally starting to uncover the truth. As he observed Paka's skill and resourcefulness, the chief couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication, knowing that his suspicions had been justified. He hoped that tonight would reveal all he needed to know about this mysterious stranger. As Paka approached his neighbor's cattle kraal, the chief's heart quickened with excitement. He had a feeling that he was about to witness something extraordinary. And he was not disappointed. Paka moved with effortless grace, as if he had done this 1,000 times before. He swiftly opened the gate to the kraal and herded one of the cows out, leading it away into the darkness. The chief watched in fascination as Paka disappeared into the night, the stolen cow trailing obediently behind him. He felt a surge of admiration for the young man's courage and ingenuity, and a twinge of envy for his youth and vitality. As Paka led the cow further into the forest, the chief struggled to keep up with him. But despite his old age and weary body, he was determined to see where Paka was taking the cow. Suddenly, Paka stopped in his tracks and the chief ducked behind a nearby tree, afraid that he had been caught. But to his surprise, Paka transformed into a magnificent lion and swiftly attacked the cow, taking it down with lightning speed. The chief's eyes widened in disbelief, as he watched the transformation take place before him. He had heard tales of men who could turn into animals, but had never actually witnessed it himself. His mind raced with the implications of what he had just seen. The chief rushed back to the village, his heart pounding with excitement and fear. It was the middle of the night, but he knew he had to wake the elders and tell them what he had just witnessed. As he entered the village, he called out to the elders, urging them to gather quickly in the meeting place. Within moments, the elders had assembled, curious to know what was so urgent. "What is the meaning of this, Jabali?" one of the elders demanded. "Why have you disturbed our rest in the middle of the night?" "I have just witnessed something extraordinary," Jabali replied breathlessly. "It concerns the stranger who arrived in our village." The other elders looked at each other in confusion, wondering what could have happened. "What is it that you have seen?" another elder asked. "I saw him transform into a lion," Jabali exclaimed, still trying to catch his breath. "Right before my very eyes." The elders gasped in disbelief, their faces contorted with shock and fear. They knew that the village was in grave danger if such a creature was in their midst. "What are we to do?" one of the elders asked. "We must devise a plan to capture him," Jabali replied firmly. "We cannot allow this to go on any longer." The elders nodded in agreement, knowing that they had to act fast to protect their village. As night fell on the village the next day, the council of elders and their best hunters set their plan into motion. They left a cow at the center of the village, knowing that Paka could not resist such an easy prey. The hunters were stationed around, hidden in the shadows, waiting for the predator. As Paka approached the cow, his senses were on high alert. He knew something was not right. He could feel a tingle in his bones, a rush of energy building up within him. As he hesitated, he observed the cow from afar, and his eyes locked onto the animal's fur. It was as if a stronger force had taken over. Suddenly, Paka felt a sharp pain in his gut, and he doubled over in agony. He fell to the ground, gasping for breath as he felt his body convulse uncontrollably. His muscles rippled and bulged, and his bones cracked and reshaped. Paka's body began to contort and twist, as if something within him was fighting to be released. His clothes were torn to shreds as his body grew larger, hairier, and more muscular. His face elongated, his teeth sharpened, and his eyes glowed a deep, menacing yellow. In a matter of seconds, Paka's transformation was complete. The hunters sprang into action, their weapons at the ready. The villagers watched in horror as Paka, now fully transformed into a lion, let out a deafening roar. The chase was on, and the stakes were high. The night air was filled with the sound of pounding hooves as the hunters' horses raced through the village square. But Paka was too quick for them, his powerful strides covering the ground at an alarming pace. The chase continued through the dark forest, with Paka darting and weaving between the trees, trying to evade his pursuers. The hunters were relentless, their determination driving them forward. They were getting closer, but Paka was still just out of reach. As they emerged from the forest into an open meadow, Paka suddenly veered off course, heading towards a steep cliff face. Jabali watched in horror as Paka leapt off the edge, disappearing into the darkness below. But the hunters didn't give up, and they cautiously made their way to the cliff's edge, peering down into the abyss. To their surprise, they saw Paka clinging to the side of the cliff, his lion form unable to climb any further. He was trapped. The hunters circled around him, their weapons at the ready. Paka snarled and bared his teeth, but he knew that he had been defeated. Jabali raised his spear, ready to strike. But as he looked into Paka's eyes, he saw a glimmer of humanity. He lowered his spear, and instead motioned for the others to help Paka climb back up to safety. Paka was brought before the Council of Elders, who solemnly deliberated on his fate. After much discussion, they decided that Paka's actions had violated the sacred laws of their village, and that he must face the consequences. They held a solemn ceremony to strip him of his powers, and the sound of solemn drums filled the air as they did so. Finally, Paka was banished from the village, his fate forever intertwined with the mysteries of the land beyond. He was destined to wander the wilderness alone, an outcast from both the human and animal worlds. As time passed, the memory of Paka began to fade. The villagers went about their lives, content in the knowledge that their village was once again safe. But the chief never forgot what had happened, and he made sure to pass down the tale of Paka's betrayal to future generations, as a cautionary tale of the dangers of deceit and the importance of trust. And so, as the years went by, the village continued to thrive, and the legend of Paka became just that, a legend. But for those who were there, who witnessed the events that unfolded, the memory of Paka would always be a reminder of the darkness that can lurk in even the most unexpected of places.